right, am I on? Can y'all hear me? A couple of you. All right, let's be opening your Bibles to 2 Samuel. I'm going to share one of my favorite Bible stories with you today. We'll kind of review that together. Do y'all normally talk? Huh? Oh, yeah, good. Okay, well, if you got any questions, I don't know if there will be any questions come up. It'll probably just me be sharing this story and making a few connections of how it's relevant today. But before we begin, I do got to tell you a story. This was a few months back when strawberries were in. I have a farm out near Jeffrey Smith. Y'all know Jeffrey, the farmer. He's really one of my closest neighbors, one of my few neighbors that I have out there. I've got the blackberries down, blackberries and blueberries. I've got those down, and for a while there, I was selling fruit trees, and I got some of the fruit down, and it seemed like I couldn't grow a pear. But this year, all of my pear trees are loaded. I got hundreds of pears that I'm looking forward to picking. But strawberries has always been a thing that I just can't really get the grasp of. I got some everbearings that I planted a few years ago, and you just got to stay on top of them. You pick the runners and you plant them. Y'all know, how many of y'all have had Jeffrey strawberries? Nobody, okay. Well, I'm surprised he ain't hooked you up, because y'all know how he brings his truck and sells everything here, right? Y'all know Jeffrey, right? Can y'all hear me? Oh. Don't do that. Okay, is that better? Okay. So I went to Jeffrey's house. I said, Jeffrey, you got any strawberries? Well, yeah. That's my only impression. That's Jeffrey for you. I said, Jeffrey, what is the key to getting yours to taste so good? He says, well, it's a secret. I said, well, what is it? He said, manure. Listen, I ain't ever doing that again. I'm going back to whipped cream. I'm just telling you. All of that just for that, right? Okay. Some of y'all get that on the way home, but it's funny. 2 Samuel chapter 9, okay? So what's going on here in this passage is David is now the king of Israel, okay? In chapter 8, he had his record keeper to kind of read to him all of his victories that he has had since he's become king. It's been a little while since Saul was king, so now he's king. In chapter 8, you had someone kind of going over, if you will, giving him a synopsis of everything that he's done up until this point. And you're going to read here in chapter 9 of, well, let's just start, okay? We'll kind of go this together. It says, in verse 1, it said, and David said, is there still anyone left in the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? Now there was a servant in the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called to him David, and the king said to him, are you Ziba? And he said, I am your servant. So David is asking, like I said, he's remembering all the victories. That's kind of what's going on. And in my mind, here in this passage, he's kind of gone back to where he's come from. Y'all know the story of how Saul was made king of Israel. He wasn't favored by God because of some of his things that he did and disobeyed God. And so God kind of changed directions. He was going to make David the new king. And you all know that David had a friend named Jonathan, which was Saul's son. Everybody with me? Okay. So now that David is king, he's kind of going back and remembering all those things. And he says, is there anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show him kindness to? Okay. So for today, the idea of kindness, I want you to think of grace. The idea of grace. This idea of grace or mercy or grace, okay? Now, there was a servant in the house of Saul, whose name was Ziba. Okay, so he is brought before, or he right here is going to tell David, yes, there is somebody else that's left. So where are we? We're in verse 3. Let's go back to 2. Well, we'll just read that again, okay? Now there was a servant in the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called to him David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I am your servant." And the king said to him, "Is there still anyone or someone in the house of Saul that I may show the kindness of God to him?" And Ziba said to him, the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He's crippled in his feet." Okay? So there is this young boy at the time when Jonathan is killed. Okay? He is kind of a young guy. Matter of fact, he's got a nursemaid, if you will, that is with him. Let's flip over to 2 Samuel chapter 4. It's just a couple of pages there, okay? And let's kind of read what's going on in this story. In verse 4, it says, "Jonathan, the son of Saul, had a son who was crippled in his feet. When he was 5 years old, when he heard the news about Saul and Jonathan being killed at Jezreel, the nurse took him and fled. And as she fled in her haste, he fell and became lame, and his name was Mephibosheth." Okay, and we'll have to say that a few times here. That's just the way I'm going to pronounce it in this West Kentucky accent. Now, question for you. When she heard this news of Jonathan and Saul being killed, the nurse, the one watching over this 5-year-old child, why does she up and flee? Why does she hurry up and get him out of the house? Now, I'm imagining that he is in, like, protected area. I don't know, in my mind, like a palace. Those are usually supposed to be well protected. Okay, you're itching and scratching. Why?
Well, I'm a smarty mouth. I like to answer every question.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
All right.
But to my mind, in that atmosphere and culture, if there was a new king, he would kill everybody that was descendants of the old king.
He said that so what he said was, if there is a new king, an heir of a new king taking the throne, which is of a different lineage, if you will, that they're going to go and kill any descendants. So that way there's no threat of the other lineage, the old lineage, trying to overtake this one. Just 2 weeks ago, I was probably running the streets of London, England, okay? And I went to the Tower of London and got to see some of those places. Y'all know about the British royals, right? They started around the 10th or 12th century, something like that. So they traced their lineage back with these royals a long way. The last 2 days of our trip, we jetted up to Scotland and spent 2.5 days there and got to see some of their castles. At both places, guess what? There's these stories of someone becoming king, and they eradicated those who were a threat to their throne. Okay? So that is absolutely what is going on. And it's still going on today. There's going on with political parties trying to outdo one another. So this is a story as old as time here, right? So this nurse got him out of there so that he can just be safe and hide, because she feared that David would come and kill him. Okay, so Ziba is saying, well, there is someone still left, David, and his name is Mephibosheth, okay? So we know his backstory, that he was with the king's palace. He was in Saul's guard, if you will, but not anymore when he found out that Saul and Jonathan were killed. Well, let's find out what happened to him, okay? We're in verse 4. And the king said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "He is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lodebar." Well, how many of you in your biblical studies ever came or ever heard of the town Lo-debar? Me either. The interpretation means town of nothing, okay? Or it's kind of out in the desert. It's out in the middle of nowhereville, okay? So here this king is, not king, but here Mephibosheth is, crippled, and now he is out in the middle of the desert hiding from David because he doesn't want to be killed, okay? In verse 5 it says, Then King David sent and brought him from his house of Machir, the son of Ammiel at Lo-debar, and Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David and fell at his face and paid homage. And David said, Mephibosheth, and he answered, Behold, I am your servant. And David said to him, Do not fear, for I will show you the kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore all of you that your son, and I will restore all the land of your father Saul, and you shall eat at my table always. So here's the meat of the passage right here. Very, very important that I want you guys to see here and how it relates to us. So here, Mephibosheth is in hiding. He's probably an adult now, okay? He's probably getting a little bit older. He's older than 5 years old for sure because we know that he can talk. And he is summoned. He's brought before David. What do you think he's thinking all along the way back to Jerusalem? My days are numbered. I'm not going to live. My days are numbered. In my mind, he's going through what he's going to petition to David, make his last plea, if you will. And so he's brought before David, and he pays homage, face down. Probably can't walk, so I'm imagining he's on his knees. Or if he's having trouble walking, it's not a very good gait. You know, he's crippled. So he goes before David, and he bows down, he pays homage. And what does he hear? What does David tell him? Do not fear. One of the commandments that Jesus tells us over and over, and Mark, you'll have to correct me on this, but is it not the most told commandment from Jesus is not to fear in the New Testament? Okay? So one of the messages from God that he wants to tell his people is when you are before him in the right manner, we don't want to fear. Do not fear. So let's figure out what happens in the rest of this passage here. And he paid homage and said, What is your servant that you should show regard to such a dead dog as I? So there his plea is. David, why would you summon me? I'm nothing. I'm crippled. I'm not going to overtake your throne. I'm a dead dog. I live out in the middle of nowhere. My closest neighbor is 1.5 miles, and he grows strawberries. His name is Jeffrey. And that's kind of the idea. Is like he's not in a town of prominence. He's out there, wherever out there is. David, I'm a nobody. I'm a dead dog. I have nothing. I'm not going to overtake your throne. I don't want what you have. Okay? Let's watch how he responds here. Then the king said to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, All that belonged to Saul and to his house I have given to your master's grandson. And you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him and bring him in the produce. All the master's grandson may have bread to eat, but Mephibosheth, your servant's grandson, shall always eat at my table. Why would David do this? Why would David summon up the lineage of Saul, okay, or Jonathan's descendants, Saul's descendants, however you want to say it, why would he bring that up? Like, and why would he go after to find someone to show this kindness to, or this mercy, or this grace to?
Jonathan was his best friend.
Yeah? So why is that significant, though? There's a connection there. Let's look in 1 Samuel chapter 20. Okay? So we have Jonathan working for his dad, and his dad's acting ugly. His dad is not behaving quite well, and Jonathan recognizes it. As a matter of fact, Jonathan recognizes that God has showed favor with David. And Jonathan and David are best friends, okay? In the Bible, it kind of describes like they hymn their souls together, or like they consider themselves kind of one in another in that way, like really good, solid friends. They kind of work together. We're going to read a small passage here, and then we'll know why David is summoning up his heirs here. Look in chapter 20, verse 12. It says, "And Jonathan said to David, the Lord God Israel be witness. When I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, the third day, behold, if he will be disposed toward David, shall I not send them, disclose it to you? But should it please my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan, and more if I do not disclose to you and send you away, that you may go into safety. But the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. And if I am still alive, show the steadfast love of the Lord, that I may not die. And do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever, when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies. And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul." So what's going on there in that passage is that Jonathan's saying, David, I recognize that God has showed favor with you, and you're going to be the new king of Israel. And I'm going to help that process happen, because I know my dad's after you. My dad's trying to kill you. So I'm going to help you. If my dad is planning to kill you, then I'm going to help you escape. And he says, as a matter of fact, will you do me a favor? Will you make a promise to me that when you become king, that you don't wipe out my descendants, that you spare my household? If I'm still alive, will you spare me? And they made that covenant, and they made that promise right there. So if we fast forward to where we are in 2 Samuel chapter 9, it was because of a promise that this guy was drugged from a desert out in the middle of nowhere, and is now still on his face, if you will, before David, begging for mercy. Okay? It was because of a promise that was made earlier. And so the passage that we read, now we're kind of back to it, is David has given orders to Ziba. He said, all right, Mephibosheth gets everything that Saul had. Any of the produce that was brought in, it goes to him and his descendants, if there's going to be any. And I want you to take care of his family, and you're going to work for him. Okay? Now, what do you think Mephibosheth is thinking in that picture? Just days, hours earlier, he's coming up with his plea, thinking about how his final days, his final week on earth is going to be like. And then the very next moment, he's standing before the king, expecting to be killed, but yet he has been restored everything that his grandfather and father had. What do you think is going through his mind? Mm-hmm. Got to be wondering why, but what else? Is this real? Is this really true? It's pinch me? What else? What else? What else could be going through his mind? It's not that hard, guys. Come on, I'm going to sit here. We've got 10 minutes to kill, and yeah, what's his ulterior motive, right? What's he really up to? This doesn't look right, doesn't smell right.
He was squeaky clean.
Okay? What would you be thinking if you can't tell me what he was thinking?
How could I be so less?
Mark, we need to bring some coffee in here between next time. What? What would he be thinking? Rough crowd. Okay. Time to move on. I get it. Okay, so let's finish this up then, okay? Where were we? We're about we're in verse 11. Then Ziba said to the king, according to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so your servant do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a son whose name was Micah, and all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both feet. Okay. So he has restored everything. He got to live in the palace. Not only did he get the land and all the proceeds from it, but he got to live and always eat at the king's table. What an invite. Okay? All because of a promise that was made. Okay? So here's my question. Here's the $1 million question. What does that have to do with us? This is just not some random Bible story, but what does it have to do with us? One day we'll eat at the king's table. Okay? Here's how I see it. Sometimes we go, when we want to run from the king because we fear God, we go and we run to the desert. We go and we try to hide from God in places where he thinks he won't find us. We go and we hide out in Nothingville where nobody's looking. Why would the king ever come look for me there? Okay? But when the king does summon me, and I do stand before the king, I can expect to be killed, especially if I'm done wrong, right? But we serve a king who extends mercy long before he'll ever extend execution. We can present ourselves as dead dogs, but that's not how God sees us. God sees us as somebody who in life, not in death, who wants to restore everything back to the way he originally established it. While we are still alive, he wants to bring us and invite us to his table. He wants to give us everything back. So, this is just a perfect example of that. God loves us so much that he's willing to go and find us and bring us before him, and we expect death, but he wants to extend us. What word did I say? And replace kindness there? Grace. That loving kindness, that grace, he wants to extend it to us while we're alive. And if we accept it, what happens? We get to eat at the king's table for the rest of our lives. Now, what's that king's table look like for today? What's it look like for us? What's that king's table look like? What is it? full of blessings, right? Like let's name a few of those. The church. Okay? Where's God's table?
Also, Travis, we still sin,
We do still sin.
and so we can run to our Father and get rid of that shame.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a biggie.
Yep. God does not seek perfection. He went and found the guy who was crippled. Okay? I don't know how Mephibosheth presented himself. I don't know how he came there, right? In my mind, maybe he wanted to paint it up a little bit where he wanted to crawl before David. Maybe a slow walk, okay? But after he'd been transformed and realized what all he got back, how do you think he came to the table every day? It says he got to eat at the king's table. So I'm imagining the guy got hungry and he got there. Maybe his step was a little bit better, but nonetheless, he still got to eat there at the king's table every day, restored but yet crippled. Okay? That's my story for the morning. Mark says he usually gives y'all about 10 minutes on a church/church. If y'all will, just know running in the halls, okay? Watch the older folks, okay, because they will towel on you.
There's a series on Netflix about David. I don't know if you may have seen it or not, but it takes David from the time he was a shepherd up until when he meets Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good,
Is this story in there?
no, this story is not in there. But it takes it before he meets Goliath. He's not,
Oh, Goliath. Oh, yeah, well, that'd be way before you. Yeah, okay.
it's a good series.
Yeah. He said there's some Netflix. You said Netflix? Yeah, Netflix documentaries out there. Called David.